quantitative measures. But I also had some few open-ended questions that really helped me to understand what my quantitative data was saying to them. So for example, which fascinated me, I was finding I had a lot of African American caregivers, and they were saying that they did not use their church for support. That flies absolutely in the face of everything that you read about, particularly African American women and their relationship to their faith. I was like, I don't know what to do with this. So that's how they were filling out the quantitative questionnaires, like, no, I don't do this, I don't do this. But luckily I had open-ended questions that asked them, what do they use for support? And what I learned is that while they didn't go to their churches for support, they weren't there to give support, and how that was helpful. Does that make sense? So they just kind of, so it's not that their faith and their relationship for them were churches didn't, not that it didn't matter, it just was very different than how the literature typically talked about it. And I talked to other people who do caregiving research with African American women, and they were finding the same thing. But it was those open-ended questions, kind of the more qualitative research that made this quantitative stuff come alive, because we were like, I don't know what to do with it.
How do you present that in a paper then?
Oh, that's a really great question.
You don't have a graph or anything. What's the...
Okay, so now the qualitative journals, which is just help to kind of figure out how to present it. But what you do is just, you pose the question literally, like, I think the qualitative in a while wasn't like that, but like how do you cope with caregiving? And then you just write their responses below that question. Literally, like in kind of, you can either just put it in parentheses or just make it really small and just kind of detail the questions. Not every response, but you kind of summarize the themes. So you look at your quantitative, we'll talk a little bit about that, but you look at your quantitative data. So for that particular question, you look at every single solitary response and then collapse it into themes, and then that's what you report as the themes from that response. Does that make sense? And there are lots of, trust me, but that's typically either very quotes or you just kind of like make indented paragraphs that kind of show the actual responses from the participants, and you can summarize it above and then say, you're the quotes from the participants. Any other questions? Keep going. I have a question for you. How can you gather good data? So how do you all think about gathering good data when you're conducting research? Quantitative or qualitative data, but how do you think about getting good data?
Well, I think a lot of times with qualitative data, you have to do open-ended questions to where you don't leave them in something.
Yes. So open-ended questions can be a great way to gather some good data. Anyone else? Again, qualitative or quantitative? I normally teach, so I don't mind it. I can wait you out.
Maybe even like validated methods of obtaining that data that have previously been demonstrated.
That's where you can kind of use other questionnaires and or like sometimes you take physiological samples or biological samples. Those could be good ways to get the data. Anything else other than have any other ideas?
High-end number.
That's lots of people, or collect data from lots of people, yes. And what should you do with the data? That becomes key. So sometimes the criticism in the room and others of those who look like us or study what we do, who do research, is that we ask all these questions, we collect all this data in a variety of ways, and do we always make good use of that data? And that's the big deal. And increasingly, participants are complaining about all the questions we ask, and then what happens? So do you all have any ideas or thoughts about what you do with the data? We see it in journals. That's one thing. We can take our data and put it in journals. But who gets that? Who sees the data once we put it in a journal format? Who is that data for? Researchers, right? So that data is for researchers once we put it, analyze it, qualitative or quantitatively, and then we typically often we put it into a journal format, and that really is for us. We share that with each other. What else could we be doing with the data?
You write a white page.
Yes, can you say more about that?
Basically, it's like a formal report. You don't really publish it, but it's open. If you need it, you can read it.
Right, so you can write a white paper is what I would call it. Yes, and that typically is for administrators or people who do research in that area to kind of learn more about what you've done. And there's one more way that I think qualitative research.
I see a lot of researchers will have their own web pages online. What's the rules for putting data on web pages?
In other words, if you're conducting research in a specific field, you have X number of papers about it, can you put the findings on your webpage as a source of information, or is that now property of the journal? How does that work?
That's a great question. You can add it, if you've already published it, you would add it with a journal reference, but you can do that. You just want to make sure the data is de-identified when you do that, so that you don't have the participants' names. It's going to make our happen. In case any of you are on the IRB. Keep it all confidential. Who else may want to see the data? Right, the community you collected it from. And that's often the part we don't do, and that's a place where qualitative research can be helpful. Because sometimes, well, a way that we've been criticized, and the government has also criticized us, the people who fund most of what we do, is that what we do is not comprehensible for the average person. Does that make sense? And we're all different disciplines. I didn't ask you what your disciplines were, but we all have our own speak. For me, it would be psych speak. For you, would be whatever your disciplines are. And we assume that everyone understands that. So my husband is a business professor. He went out to dinner with some of my psychology colleagues, and we said someone was asked this 2 cluster B. Like, who talks like that? And to all of us but him, that made sense. We just kind of kept the conversation going, and he felt very excluded and felt like we were being ridiculously arrogant and elitist. Does that make sense? So we weren't trying to do that. We were just talking. But we all kind of get in our discipline, speak, and have these conversations that just don't make sense to the public. And that's where qualitative research, I think, can be helpful. If you are posing qualitative questions, you're actually posing questions that are relatively easy to comprehend. Does that make sense? And you're getting data back that actually is easier to comprehend. So it's always easier for you to get that data back out to the public in a form that's a little bit easier to understand than what we typically do with some of our research findings. By the way, I don't know if any of you have been writing grant proposals, but part of what NIH wants you to do now is write a paragraph that summarizes your research proposal. And some of that is the exact criticism that we were submitting proposals that no one understood. So now you have to write a paragraph in plain English that explains what your research proposal is about. And some journals actually now want you to include a paragraph that summarizes your research in very layman's terms. One more thing. So part of using qualitative research, it allows you to ask questions in a way that laymen can understand. You get data back in a way the layman can understand. And it also helps you to give that information back out to the public. Again, a huge criticism of what we do, this is a criticism of all of the research that we do, is that the people we collect the data from never quite get the results back, so they don't know what happened. And again, we need to do this better with whatever type of research we're collecting, but with qualitative research, often qualitative researchers find a way to make sure the participants in the community they sampled get some of that data back. Does that make sense? Like in the form, you could just do a newsletter. There are lots of ways you can give them that data back on the website. That gets to be interesting depending on the community you collected in and can they really access your website. And just kind of making sure the community has access to the results from the study. When you're doing qualitative research, there are 2 ways to think about it in terms of theory. And you have grounded theory, and that's theory that emerges from the data. So you collect this data, and then you look at the data and let it tell you what's important. And then you have superimposed theory. And that's when you start with the theory, and you determine if the data supports your theory. I could say, if I'm doing a study of caregivers, the grounded theory just says I ask these open-ended questions, and I let the data tell me what's important for the caregivers. What's your experience like? Like as broad questions as I could possibly think of. Superimposed theory would be me saying, I think caregivers are really stressed, and I ask questions that are specific about that. Does that make sense? Like I'm kind of imposing what I think about the population. Neither is wrong, they're just very different, and sometimes you may use both types of theoretical approaches depending on your confident familiarity with the population you're studying.
Is it normal in psychology to use theory instead of hypothesis?
That's a really great question. It's normal with qualitative research to start with theory. So it's not discipline specific, it's more of the methodology specific. But qualitative researchers typically start with grounded theory or superimposed theory, but you kind of have this theoretical orientation that you use to approach the research you're going to do. Okay. And in terms of sampling, you can have propositive sampling, you can have quota sampling or snowball sampling. I'll start with the last one. This, excuse me, a sampling technique that is really common and often used when collecting qualitative data, and that's snowball sampling. So I will ask someone to participate in my study. And once they're done, I ask them, do they know anyone else who they think would be appropriate? So snowball sampling, snowball technique is used really often in collecting qualitative data. Why do you think it's important if I'm asking someone, can you tell me someone else you think would be interested in the study? What am I doing? How does that help me?
If you're looking for a very specific population, you can be interested in that one.
Right. So often when you're doing qualitative studies, you may be working with a population that's hard to reach. And who else knows how to reach that population than people in it? Does that make sense? So if you're doing autism research, all the parents of children with autism, they know the other parents. Does that make sense? If I do stuff with grandparents raising their grandchildren, trust me, they know the other grandparents. I mean, so sometimes you just have samples that may be hard to reach, but they know the other people who are part of that sample. So that's a really, so snowball technique is used often, and it can really help you kind of more quickly than other ways to get your sample size that you need for your study. Quota sampling, you know exactly the sample size you need to really get some good data. Does that make sense? You kind of start there. Propositive sampling, again, you kind of determine the sample you need. Some ways you can do that is you look at other qualitative studies in your area and see what samples they are using. So when we have quantitative methods, we would do our sample size calculations. Sometimes with qualitative methods, it's not as easy to do your sample size calculation, but what you can do is look at the qualitative literature, look at other studies that have been done in your area, and see what the sample sizes that they're using. Does that make sense? Okay.
Do you take into account what you think might be the variability between observers and calculating sample size in this setting?
Oh, that's a really, really great question. They're all great questions, by the way, but I get excited. I love this stuff. So yes, you do. And that's part of, excuse me, one of the criticisms of snowball sampling. If I'm asking one participant to tell me someone else that they know could participate in the study, that person may be too much like them. Does that make sense? I get a lot of the same person or same type of person, same demographic profile. So it's a little bit harder to kind of be intentional about the variability, but you can do that if you start like from a more propositive sampling strategy. So I can say, I want to make sure I have demographic variability. That may be what's the most important for me. So that may mean I'm sampling in different areas. Does that make sense? Broadly speaking, that could be different parts of the country. Within Alabama, I may do something, if I want rural areas, I may do kind of the black zone if I wanted rural African Americans, but go to North Alabama if I wanted rural Caucasians. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I could get kind of two rural populations asking the same question, and that would help me with that variability. And demographic variability more important to me.
And then the total size of the population, does that need to depend on what you're expecting the degree of variability to be between those groups? You know, like how different their responses are going to be?
Yes, okay. Yes, and that becomes really, really important. So part of, we'll kind of get some of this a little bit more down the road when we get to more, excuse me, kind of the way you analyze the data. But a big thing, you kind of saturate your responses. So you ask the same questions until you start getting the same answers, and then you have kind of saturated. Does that make sense? You're not getting anything new from that data. And that kind of tells you when to stop. And that could take a long time, or that could happen relatively quickly. But and that tells you what your major themes are too, once you start hitting that kind of saturation data point. Well, this is that. I do a lot of work in culture. What I'm fascinated by, which I feel like I have to say, because you call it the variability, sometimes we think our variability will be by racial differences, and sometimes that's not the variability, but it may be by income. Does that make sense? But sometimes kind of we look more alike or different based on our income than by race. So when you're doing qualitative studies, it's really important to look at the literature in your area to kind of, you can sort some of that out by looking at their demographic profile and seeing if people look the same or different. So I think qualitative data is a little bit more work up front, but it can be incredibly rewarding in terms of what you find on the back end, responses to your data, how people may look the same or different in different areas, which is why I moved to San Francisco. So moving to Alabama was ever so interesting for me. But really understanding our bias when we talk about low-income communities. A low-income community in an urban area is not the same as a low-income community in a rural area. And there's several major differences, but can you all think of some differences that qualitative data really does help bring alive?
What's a rural income in San Francisco versus Alabama?
Exactly, they're hugely different. So low income in the Bay Area may be like 35,000, which is, you can barely function in San Francisco on that amount of money, but you can do really well, does that make sense, in rural Alabama. So income really matters, and access to resources. I was stunned doing some work in rural Alabama. The clinics, the medical clinics closed at 5. And I didn't think go to the major city. I'm like, well, what did you get sick after 5? Like, what did you do? That really troubled me. So you need to have, and it's a real issue, but you have to have access to, you have to have a car or access to someone who has transportation to get you to the clinic or the medical facility is open after 5. And so those are real issues that, for me, were really different learning to work in rural Alabama. Again, it really really made me think very differently about how I thought about low-income populations. Just transportation by itself, like buses. If you don't have access to public transportation, that can really be very problematic. Does that make sense? And we had Walmart gift cards, and I had to stop using those because the Walmarts were too far apart. So that really wasn't a good incentive to get someone to participate because the Walmart, they were just too far apart. So what we did, and this is where qualitative research can be incredibly helpful, we did a small study just to talk to some of the residents and find out what incentives worked well for them. Just a small study, just ask, what would encourage you to participate in research studies, does that make sense? And what we learned were things that went back into that community. So the next time we did a study there, we used a local restaurant and their gift cards. Gift cards for that local restaurant. They put money back into that local community. Everyone knew where it was, and that local restaurateur was incredibly happy. So you know what she did? You need to participate in this. I mean, she told lots of people about the study, and they were happy that the money was going back into the community. They all liked the restaurant. Does that make sense? So it was a very different way to think about research and to partner with that community that none of us lived in. So again, qualitative research takes a lot more time, but it can be incredibly rich. And you learn a lot because you have to engage in that community in a very different way than kind of when we go in, ask a few questions, and then leave pretty quickly. Qualitative research kind of requires that you understand your community, the community you're working in a little differently. And one thing I wanted to do so when I did a study in 4 counties in the Black Belt, I assumed, because I was working with primarily African American caregivers, primarily women, I was like, I got this, right? African American woman, no issue. And the first time I met with I met with local community professionals to help me with my recruitment. So they were ministers' wives and social workers, the people who would know the population. And the first question was, where are you from? I talked too fast and didn't have a southern accent. I'm like, my parents are from Mississippi. They're like, where are you from? It's like, I grew up in San Francisco. Does that mean? And luckily, I had my lovely, lovely research assistant who was from Daphne, Alabama. So she started talking, and they related to her much more than to me. So I say that on purpose, that what I found humbling when I started to do more qualitative research was not only do you get to know your community better, but then your community very quickly gives you feedback about you and what you need to do to really do some really good work with them. Does that make sense? So we actually slowed the study down so I could take tours of the area so they could teach me a little bit about who they were. And honestly, I ran out of money. It was NIH funded study before I ran out of participants. So once they were like, oh, she's all right. But it slowed down. I had to slow down the process, and then we could beat up. And it went really, really well, but it was very humbling to kind of need to step back to make them feel more comfortable with me. So if you decide to truly engage in qualitative research, it's really important to make sure your population, you can connect with them in some way. Is that good? So for those of you who've done qualitative research, is that ring true for you?
What's the black belt?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, the black belt is more with geography, so let's see, who's talking?
Like West Alabama,
Yes,
it's like a river delta region agriculture.
Greene County, Hill County, Wilcox County, so it's maybe West Alabama, my husband would be horrified, Alabama, but it is more West Alabama, and what I learned, it's named the black belt for the soil, however, the population is primarily African American. Yes. And underprivileged.
One question I have about the qualitative research is how do you kind of remove investigative biases? It seems very difficult when you're so involved with surveys, questions, of participants to really step back from your own biases.
That's a really, really great question. So that's, you talked about the theory. If you superimpose that can help. So if I let the data kind of tell me who the participants are, sometimes, like I work with my population long enough, it's hard to do that realistically. So I don't analyze the data. I have research participants, but when I started, I was one of the people who analyzed the data. However, you do it with someone else. And what you're trying to do is have you kind of take a few participants just so you learn how to code together. So you have all this qualitative data, you figure out how to code it together. So that it's not just me who's looking at this data, it's me and at least one other person, depending on the size of the study, maybe several other people, and then you code together. So I've been on a couple of qualitative dissertations across disciplines, and typically, if you're on that dissertation, part of what you're agreeing to is to at least help with coding some of the data. Not always, but does that make sense? Like I've done it on a colleague of mine, we at least look at some of the data to help with coding, and that's really how you get around the biases, making sure you're not the only person who is coding that data and interpreting the data after it's been coded. Is that fine? So they're observational studies, and that's really kind of unstructured data collection. That could be you go to a park, usually. Your question was about children and how children interact. You could go to a park and watch children interact on a playground. Does that make sense? So you're really kind of observing the children without them. I don't know how you observe children without them knowing that you're there, because children are very observant. But it's the degree that you can kind of just be a part of the setting. And or others have done, they want to look at family dynamics or how parents interact with the children or what children are like at home. They've actually gone into the home. When you go into the home, you kind of you kind of become a part of the family setting to the degree possible. If you were in my house, trust me, children, that's the only thing you don't live here. Why are you in our house? But people do this, like, so you're there until they become comfortable with you. And then you just kind of observe what the family dynamics are like. Does that make sense? So there are lots of ways you can kind of do unstructured data collection. More structured data collection, you're categorizing phenomena, you're paying attention to what's going on, and you're putting it into things in a way. You may have checklists, you're observing it, but you know what you're looking for, and you're seeing how that occurs, how often it occurs. You may have rating scales which tell you, this is good, bad, or whatever kind of rating scheme you're using. So the bigger themes for this, you can be the passive observer, which is more here, the active observer, when I mentioned kind of maybe going into a home setting or other settings, or the participant observer. You can actually be participating. My focus of research is geropsychology, but I apologize, the kid references are coming up to me. But if you're in a classroom with children, you may be the teacher's aide, or we say you're the teacher's aide, and that makes sense because there are lots of teacher's assistants around. So you're kind of participating with them. Maybe you're doing a puzzle together. There was a study recently, they wanted to see how children engage with the medical profession. So they brought in like stethoscopes and other kind of things just to watch the children play. But the real point was that it was a research participant who was watching the children play, kind of interacting with them to see their comfort level with the medical devices that were being used. Interviews central to the relevant group or process. So this is really where the data starts, for me anyway, to come alive. Have any of you ever done focus groups or participated in them? Yes. Okay. Participants? Have you done them? Oh, great.
I was a research assistant.
Okay, yes. So focus groups is a very big way to collect data. I'll go back to it just one second. Again, focus groups, key informants, or critical incident reports. For focus groups, you typically get between 6 to 10 people. You don't usually want a focus group that has more than 10 people because it becomes hard to manage. Okay. Somewhere between, like, usually 8 is kind of a sweet spot, but sometimes you can go up to about 10. And you normally have 2 people, the person who's kind of doing the talking, but there's always someone with you, the co-facilitator, who's monitoring the group for the nonverbals that are going on in the room that can kind of help the primary facilitator figure out when they need to redirect. Or like, because sometimes if someone's dominating the group, they can kind of help the facilitator to manage some of the dynamics that may be hard for the main person to kind of see all of that. And the focus groups are designed to ask particular questions. And in focus groups, you just want to get your participants' responses. You can still you can do it to saturation, or at least depending on how much time you have. You do it to find out how they feel per response. And then they typically last for an hour, no longer than an hour and a half. And you can provide refreshments before and or after. Yes, and focus groups can be a great way to collect data. You can learn a lot about whatever it is you need to know. And in terms of the co-facilitator can be taking notes, again, helping you manage the dynamics in the room, but you can also audio tape it, videotaping, which of course your participants would have agreed to ahead of time. That can really make sure you don't miss all the dynamics in the room. Great. And there's software now that will help you analyze the data, which is fabulous. So even if you audio tape it without the advantage of, if you don't have a video recorder, you can put the audio tape into the computer. There's software that will help you almost type it up for you. It's wonderful. So there are lots of, as qualitative research becomes more common and more popular as a method of collecting data, there are more and more technology, the interface of the technology is better to help you analyze that data, which is great. Key informants, which are good and bad, primarily good, but those are people who help you understand the population you're working in. They may help you recruit in the population you want, or they can provide you with the data you want. Key informants are typically people who know the community you want to be in really, really well. The downside often of key informants, they may have their own biases and agendas. So I know people who work with key informants and it's been great. And other times key informants who understand the research enterprise sometimes feel like we have this huge pot of money. And if they're working with you, what are you giving back? Does that make sense? So that can get to be interesting and tricky. Like, no. Don't have a lot of money here. So people have talked about key informants. Like, you have to be really careful when you're selecting your key informants to the degree that you can. Because some key informants are just great and others they understand, like, they want to be written into the grant, or they want to, and sometimes that's a great thing, but just being more realistic about what you can offer and what you can't offer can be helpful up front. So there are groups of people, this is the example coming to mind, but you have groups like the Ministerial Alliance can be helpful, but sometimes you have people within that body who may understand the research enterprise and kind of feel like you aren't giving them enough. Does that make sense? So just being really clear up front with what you can offer, what you can't. They can save you a lot of trouble on the back end. I'm just being really, really clear about that. But I actually had a grandparent. I love it. I did a support group for a while for grandparents who raised their grandchildren. A lot of them are stressed, and they have varying levels of positive and negative coping with the stresses of raising a grandchildren. Many of them, for me, were middle-aged or older adults. A lot of them were over 65, like raising little kids. They had some interesting issues in lots of ways. But one of them was not raising her grandchildren. She just came to the support group because she thought it was a good idea. And she was a great kind of key informant person, does that make sense? She knew everything about that community. She always knew who was raising kids. She was really helpful, helping me identify resources for that population. Clinically, she also knew when I wanted to do a research study, where I should do it. Key informants can really help you. Why does it matter where you do your study if you're doing qualitative research? Because I need to do qualitative research. But why does location matter? And let me ask you, do you all have difficulty bringing people to UAB for research studies? Yes. Why do you have difficulty? Parking, yes. Parking is a nightmare. And this is it's a real issue. So when you're thinking about your research, does that make sense? You have to be realistic about who you are, the setting you're in, and the population you want to reach. So that could be a huge barrier, is your population just getting to you. Does that make sense? So key informants can absolutely help you in that regard. I did a study which is really far. It was across disciplines. Again, we did it in the Blackville or West Alabama, thank you. And it was across disciplines. We did it on a mobile unit. So we did mental health and physical health screenings, but then referred people on back to the local communities if they needed to see maybe someone for mental health and or physical health. But the way we chose our site that we set up the mobile unit was based on talking to some key informants who knew those. We did in 5 Black Belt counties, and they would say, for example, set up the mobile unit across the street from the CVS. Really? Really? That wasn't what we were thinking. And everyone knew where that CVS was. It was frequented a lot, does that make sense? And it increased the number of people who would see us. Let's see, we set it up across the street from a mortuary in one area. No, right. But the mortuary owner was also the mayor. Right. And everyone knew where that mortuary was. So sometimes your settings may be non-traditional, but they can be really helpful for that community because people know where those places are. They're highly trafficked and or people just kind of pass through there on their way to and from an area. We set up one outside of the local shrimp company. Those are people who are working all the time. They don't really they're not going to the doctor as much or mental or physical health care as much as they should. But they all have risks, and that was a great place to be. Does that make sense? So your key informants really help you figure out where you can kind of do your study, the setting you need to be in. My campus is just like yours. Parking is horrible. So we tend to not do things on campus unless it's in the evenings. And then still you want to find places on campus that are pretty easy to identify and access. And critical incident reports. If something major happens, you can then interview people based on that incident. You're kind of collecting data and collecting data till it saturates. Okay. So your types of interviews can be structured interviews, which mean I have a set of questions that I'm asking every participant. Semi-structured, which allows for more open-ended questions. Usually semi-structured questions go along with a quantitative study as well. So you're doing both. You're collecting some quantitative data, questionnaires, maybe physiological measures, and you're asking some open-ended questions. Or just unstructured interviews. Tell me how you're doing. That's really not a great unstructured question, but tell me about your caregiving experience. Tell me how you feel about being a parent of an autistic child. I think broad as your question can be to kind of get the response that you want. In terms of qualitative techniques, we can have detail-oriented probes, elaboration probes, or clarification probes. Someone may ask you or may respond, and then you ask them very detailed questions based on their response. You may just say, could you please tell me a little bit more about that, to let them elaborate so you're not guiding as much what they say to you, or just clarification. You just don't understand what was just asked, or you just need. So can you explain that a little bit more? Is that? But on the last page of this has references of this slide. You can kind of go back. You can have a case study evaluation. You can look at just a case and really analyze that case to help you find out more in depth about a population, particularly a population you're not as familiar with. Does that make sense? Okay. We talked a little bit about this. You can have recording and analysis of key interactions. You can do that with audio tape or videotape now. And audio tape has really gotten incredible. The last time we did a study using audio tape, you could save up to 8 interviews on one disc. Audio tape isn't much anymore, but it's really quite helpful. And or videotaping can be really helpful. And it's really great because your participants often forget that the videotape is in the room. So you really get some good data. And you also pick up on nonverbals, which can be incredibly helpful. So it's what we say within, what we don't say. That can be just as important. And sometimes you miss that without having the videotape to help you figure that out. Attention to data validity. You can have triangulation, which I mentioned earlier, and that's collection from independent sources using the same means. So okay, you can use audio tape, you can use videotape, and you may also have someone who's transcribing the data. And you want to make sure all of that data is consistent. Particularly, just don't rely on the person transcribing the data. Why might that not be the greatest thing to do? If I have a student if I'm doing a focus group and a student is there transcribing the data, why might I want another method of data collection? They might miss something, yes. But please remember I said that because we all think, and we are smart, and we pay attention, but you may miss something, or definitely the person transcribing your data may miss something. And our shorthand is often not as helpful as we think. Because you're just trying to keep up in real time, and you think whatever that abbreviation you wrote, of course you'll remember what you wrote. Really? And you make that a day later, definitely I think it's a week later before you go back to that particular transcript. You're like, I think this is what was happening. I mean, so you have to do too much recreating. Does that make sense? So it's really nice to have audio tape and or video tape plus someone transcribing. So you have multiple sources to gather the data. That's the most helpful. And at least 2 sources of data. So if you're doing the interview, at least have an audio tape, something other than just relying on the human being. We don't do it intentionally, but it's really bad when you have to rely on your memory or something. When you're collecting data in real time, there's almost no way to get around that because you're just trying to keep up and not have a participant like, excuse me, can you stop while I write this down? Just hold that thought. You want them to keep going. So you want to make sure you have another means of collecting the data. Feedback from study participants can be incredibly helpful. So typically at the end of a study, this happens in quantitative research, but definitely in qualitative, you have a set of questions that ask for more. How did you feel about the study? If there's something you would have liked to see differently, does that make sense? So just kind of giving them a chance to provide you with the feedback. And sometimes that feedback can be incredibly helpful. For example, now we have these really interesting titles for research. We spend a lot of time coming up with catchy titles to recruit people. And participants may say, this is not what I thought the study was about. Yes, we give them the IRB and all that kind of the consent forms. They fill out all that information. But by that point, they're there, they've committed to do it. But based on your title, they thought it would be about something else. So that can be really helpful feedback for you the next time you're doing the study to think about your title, you need to phrase it a little bit differently. That was just an example. I know it has come up pretty recently for someone, but there are other things that the responses, the participants' responses, the feedback helps you to figure out to make your subsequent study better. You may have asked too many questions. Sometimes we ask lots of questions, and the participant burden is really high. And what we really want is to be able to have our participants participate again, right? So we want to make sure our burden is reasonable, and the feedback questions at the end can definitely help you kind of figure out how many questions to ask and what's too much or too little. And really understanding your outlying cases. So sometimes we just ignore the outlier. So if we're doing quantitative data, right, we just get rid of that data. But if you're doing qualitative stuff, you don't necessarily want to get rid of that data. You want to pay attention to that data to see why that data is different than all of your other data. You still may make that same decision at the end. You want to get rid of it. Or maybe telling you something about your participants, and maybe this is the type of participant you want for your next study. Does that make sense? So really kind of paying attention to those outliers can be incredibly helpful. So I have a colleague who does quantitative and qualitative research with colorectal cancer studies. So what she wants is to have more people participate in colorectal cancer screenings, and she uses churches for recruitment. And she'll go and she'll do a qualitative study to figure out what that particular study knows about colorectal cancer. And then that helps her figure out how she needs to recruit. So there are lots of ways to think about how you can use your qualitative data to do that. And something she found out from doing this, that they didn't know much, and they didn't want to know much more. And so I love this, that what she did find out, they talked about their faith a lot. What she realized, just based on the responses, that she needed somehow to tie faith and colorectal cancer. I know that seems crazy. But I wish I had bought some of her examples because they're really great. She was actually able to do that. So what she did was get a small group of participants from different churches. She actually did it in Birmingham. And they came up with scriptures that tied to health. I thought that was pretty cool. So what she did, I can't remember the title of her study, but in the title, it was something about kind of she tied faith and health. And then she set up a series of focus groups, and they started with scriptures that related to health. And it was great. So she had the community participants help her design that piece of her study, but it was really from her focus groups before she got into the population to figure out what was important for that population and how she could get them interested in this topic. Does that make sense? And they helped her figure it out. Another breast cancer can be a topic, particularly in African American communities, that no one wants to talk about. So again, she did another study tying the faith and health connection, and that really helped a lot. So you'd be surprised that there's so many ways you can use the kind of qualitative data to help you with your study. It can be its own study, it just helps you understand your population, but there's so many great uses, I think, of the data. Attention to data reliability. You can have detailed documentation analysis. This is incredibly important when you're doing qualitative research to make sure, as the scholar asked me back, like how do you make sure that the research isn't biased if you're the only person looking at the data? You don't want to ever be the only person looking at the data. You have at least one other person checking the data with you to help with reliability and help you kind of make sure you're coming up with different things. And that's part of the parallel review by independent investigators. So that's really helpful. So someone who's not as invested in the project as you, to be the person who helps you with the scoring, can be incredibly great. And then you want to go back to your literature in that area to see if what you're finding is consistent or very different. Again, for triangulation, we can talk about methods triangulation, which is using an audio tape, videotape, maybe someone transcribing. Investigator triangulation, you have the PI of the project. You can have someone else with you when you're collecting the data, but make sure there's someone else who can kind of help you interpret the data, who's helping you with the data collection in some way, and with your theory to make sure it all kind of makes sense. So if you're doing qualitative research, the real goal is to not do it alone. So to the degree that you can, you're kind of keeping your opinions and your thoughts about your population as unbiased as possible. We all have biases, so let's not be naive about that. But working with others can kind of help you to put your biases in check. So your study may need to take longer to make sure you're doing your data till you have saturation. You may have someone checking the data along the way to make sure the data is consistent, like your coders are doing okay. So you don't want to wait till the end of the study to code all of your data. You want to have points along your study. If you figure it'll take you 6 months to collect your data, in month 1, you want to kind of check in on the data to make sure your coders are scoring consistently. Does that make sense? Like you kind of want to keep checking the data along the way to make sure that your coders are still relatively reliable. They're kind of scoring the same way. Because it's horrible when you get to the end, you score all the data to find out it's not really working well, so you kind of want to have checks throughout the entire process. And you want to have, again, at least one other person coding than you. But if you have more than one other person, that's even better, but I know some of that is determined by the amount of money available. Peer review becomes important, having someone, if possible, not only checking the data, but your interpretations of the data, kind of running those by someone if you can. Excuse me. How do you think about your descriptors, or how do you describe your population can be really important. Negative case sampling. What do you do when you have results that aren't consistent with what you wanted to find? Kind of thinking about that a priori before you start your study. What do we do when we have outliers, something that doesn't work as well? Does that make sense? Kind of being thoughtful about how you approach your data. And just making sure you are really able to document every single component of your study. So any of you, if you did a qualitative study, you should be able to hand over to me all of your methodology, and I should be able to replicate what you did. And that's really the best way to kind of minimize the bias. If you're always being mindful that someone else may be checking your data, so you want to make sure it's as consistent and as reliable as you can set up, having multiple coders, making sure you have multiple ways you're collecting the data. And not just, and you have your coders, and you want to make sure you're documenting. So documentation becomes a really big deal with qualitative research. So it's not sufficient to say we have multiple coders. You want to say at every time point that they checked to make sure they were still coding consistently. At every time point, these were the things we had. We had these things until saturation. These things continued for a week, for 2 weeks, for a month. You really want to make sure you're documenting all of that. This is really important, the researcher's thoughtful reflections. Let's go back to the focus group example. If I'm doing a focus group, there's dynamics that are going on in the room, and I'm thinking about those dynamics. As soon as the focus group ends, I need to sit down for a second and just write all that down. If I'm doing just a one-on-one interview, as soon as that interview's done, what I want to do as soon as I can, write all that information down. Why do you think that's helpful?
We just got expression in mind. You might remember things you won't remember later.
Yes. So it's fresh on your mind. You may remember things, and there could be something that's coming up. Does that make sense? That you just won't remember later on, or you can start tracking. Kind of there may be themes or patterns emerging, or just something. I was on a dissertation, and the dissertation was about reporting child sexual abuse. The people who did the reporting, like with the police or social workers, like the different types of people involved in those type of reporting issues. And what the researcher was finding is that depending on the type of discipline the person being interviewed, how they were responding differently to the question. And that, she didn't see that coming. I mean, same set of questions, but she just started making kind of side notes to see. And what was happening is it was triggering something about that discipline and how they thought it was appropriate to respond to that type of question. Does that make sense? So things that she only kind of checked by just writing down immediately after the interview, when I asked these questions, there were pauses or additional feedback that I didn't anticipate, just little things that at the time may seem meaningless, but if anything that catches your attention, you want to make sure you're writing that down on the side. Okay. I keep talking about this a lot, kind of the themes. So you want to, you can analyze data based on the themes that emerge. So typically, if you interview 5 or more people, there will be consistent points that come up. So my example, when I interviewed grandparents raising their grandchildren, what often comes up in focus groups and independent and individual interviews, when you ask them like, what could be helpful to your caregiving role, they talk about resources. And what I realized is not that the resources weren't available, these are populations that just didn't know the resources were there. Does that make sense? So kind of connecting them to social services became important because they had this consistent theme of, well, I don't know where this is or how to do this, which meant that they were researchers. I was stunned at how little they knew about the available resources, but it came up from the focus groups and from individual interviews that there are a lot of resources that people just didn't know were available. So one of our themes was how do you connect or the lack of knowledge regarding resources. Does that make sense? That would kind of really kept coming up pretty consistently. There's statistical packages that you can use that will analyze your data for you. You can put in things like words and see if they come up pretty consistently. That can be incredibly helpful. But I encourage you, if you've not done this before, or relatively new to it, or even if you've done it for 10 years, it's always helpful, even if you have the statistical packages, to do one or two just by hand. Like to look at all the data just to get a feel for what the data is telling you without the statistical packages. Because the packages are based on the keywords we put into the packages, if that makes sense. So it helps you to figure out there are things coming up that you just didn't think should be key terms. So when we've done some mental health stuff, now we're on DSM-5, but DSM-4, anyway, the last DSM, they're the formal mental health terms. When we look at the focus group data, well, even before today, we figured this out doing the focus groups. In rural communities, a lot of them were, which fascinated us, they were describing mental disorders, but not using any of the mental health terms that we are familiar with. So no one was saying this person was depressed or had schizophrenia, but that's exactly what they were describing. Does that make sense? So it was fascinating for us. So what we were able to do is look at all that, the data we had, and just kind of create a code book using the terms they were coming up with. So I think we actually had to do a little bit more work, but kind of mid-focus group, we realized that we could either use the terms they were using and or describe it in more detail, and that was the most helpful. Instead of me saying, are many people in your population depressed? The answer was no. But when they started talking, that's exactly what they were describing. Or they talked, it was beautiful descriptions of kind of psychopathology, but they were not using DSM terms. We had this whole new cool code book with terms, but it was just, that's what the data was telling us. Which is interesting because we thought that they would not be open to mental health. So we talked about behavioral health, using other terms. That wasn't a problem at all. The real problem is they just were using terms that were different than mental health providers normally use. Does that make sense? It's really interesting. Okay. Here's some of the, I'm sorry. So advantages of software packages, it helps you organize the data. It provides you a way to store the data. You can easily retrieve the data. You can look at frequency, count of the words. It's easier to examine the relationship between the data. What does this mean versus that? The disadvantages, it can slow down your data analysis phase. It can absolutely stifle creativity. So if I'm just relying on software and they're not using the mental health terms that I anticipate, right? They're not saying depression or schizophrenia, then my software is telling me they aren't doing what I need. Does that make sense? But that may not be true. So it definitely doesn't do the thinking for you. The researcher is part of the analysis when you kind of look at the data yourself, but not necessarily when you're using your packages, and you lose the context. You don't know what was said before. All they do is make a count of things. So you lose kind of what was going on before or after that. And you can include more important information as you input the data. So if you're doing it yourself, kind of inputting your own data, then you can make side notes or do different things. You don't lose the context. But when you rely on your software packages, you don't have that information. I have some cool things coming up that I would love to show you, but I don't know if you all stop for a break or you want me to keep going. I can stop here, like give you a 10-minute break. That would be helpful. Okay. Then we'll come back. I'll give you some examples like photo voice and some cool stuff. I think that'll make this come alive and you don't just hear me. Okay. So if we come back maybe at 9:10.
I know.
Yeah, and then when you go back to like, I know.
Your whole back.
You have that weird snap on these publishers.
Yeah, that's why we got you there.
Anyway, I don't think email.
Yeah, and then they yeah, that was interesting to try to get in there.
You're right, it was.
But there were kind of like.
Yeah, they were like the complex, doing everything. They started having sick. They just like 4 days of
Yeah, then my mom's a speech pathologist. So I get in this conversation with her, it's like, how do you quantify how well your student is doing, year to year? I mean, from her experience, she writes up reports for each student. There's no grading, she doesn't have as much of a grading scale a lot of times, so it's all, who's talking a bit more now, or, and quantify that,
yeah.
I guess, can't really do that to some of these kids.
They have the quantitative analysis, and it's really nice.
Yeah.
And have a richer way of capturing.
Well, I mean, I guess in this case, we have a one-on-one, relationship. I mean, you can tell that, we used to say nothing, and now we're having full conversations, so that's obviously improvement. It's, and maybe you can give it a test for that kind of thing, but it's not the science doesn't quantify it, say, no, there's improvement here, so, yeah, it's actually. Here's the second person on the side here.
Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mention that. Michelle had no one board stuff together.
Oh, okay.
And she got her activity.
Oh. I'm out.
She's now in the university.
Okay.
But we developed the site together. I talked to her yesterday, she said, how do you develop
Alright. So I think you're not in Alabama.
this?
Okay, alright.
We were supposed to move here for a year, that was 6 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, and we both got jobs, but never, like, it was like we both wanted to move.
Yeah.
And the cost of living is reasonable.
Yeah, I just thought of it, I do know there's another big city. I'm in neurology. Yeah, the cost of living is great, so, so it's not here, and then you finish school, it's like, I've been working to be here, and it's like, no, here for another 3 years, I'm gonna be
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, let's get you out here around. Oh, yeah. I had money and I could see $1 billion on San Francisco.
Okay, I get it. Always be like right now.
Yeah. We had friends who moved out there recently. Money, kids might not have a family clear for your living. Two-bedroom, with a half bath. And we love it, all right. Yeah.
But it took me time. But I don't know the way I want to go back. Well, we're not all going to court. She just does not appreciate it.
So it is mostly, I guess, appreciate someone taking away.
How many times?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyway, hi everyone, I'm let me get started again. Okay. This is a really, and you do have a copy of the handouts. This is really a great YouTube video. You can find everything on YouTube now. But this is a really great example of coding. If you go to this YouTube video, it's really, really helpful to kind of walk you through how to think about coding, qualitative research. It's incredibly helpful. And then you all have that handout. It's a really great video. I'm sorry, what I didn't do at the beginning of this talk. So the other name of the person on the slide is Michelle Martin. She's a friend and colleague who has left UAB. So we partner on, we used to anyway, give several talks on this campus. One on diversity, community engagement, this talk on qualitative research. She now left and went to the University of Tennessee Health Sciences Center. But we developed this talk together and we used to give it together, so I could not take her name off. I talked to her yesterday, but anyway, that's why her name is still on there, Michelle, because she was my friend and partner in doing this kind of research. And she still would be available. There are a few other people on your campus who would be great if you want to know more about qualitative research. One thing that's not on the last page, but I will mention to all of you, those of you who've done qualitative research and have an interest in doing more, there, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in the summer hosts a few, I think it's at least two times in the summer, if not 3. They host these week-long workshops on qualitative research that's funded by NIH. And they're very well attended and very well done. So you have a week, like all the topics I'm covering now, they take each one of those topics and you have a day to learn, about focus groups, how to do them in more detail, what to think about them, how to analyze your data, all the qualitative journals that may be appropriate for your research, how to think about quantitative and qualitative methods combined. It's a really lovely, I think, series of workshops. So if you are so inclined, and if this is your primary source of data collection or would just like to learn more, I would strongly encourage you to consider the UNC Chapel Hill workshop. And they provide you with a certificate at the end. So when you're applying for NIH funding, it looks nice to say that you've attended those workshops and you've kind of learned how to think about qualitative research. And but I've mentioned it more than once because it was a big deal when NIH started to recognize qualitative research. Does that make sense? Everything was just quantitative, but NIH now really sees the value in doing qualitative research and are supporting that type of research, which is really important to think about, again, doing qualitative research alone or in combination with quantitative research. Photo voice is another way to collect qualitative research, and the information I'm presenting is from a study in the Southeast, in the Mississippi River Delta, Central Valley, California, and Appalachia. Photo voice gains the perspective of the community The community members photographed their communities and shared stories, thoughts regarding factors that influence the physical activity of children in their rural setting. I hope this is helpful to you all. Hard for me to see that, I'll just read it here. There's a lot of vacant houses that have a lot of drug and criminal activity going on. It is unsafe for the kids. And look how close it is to the roads. I don't like my kids walking here. When I read these, I want you to think about, in our country, there's this movement talking about obesity and nutrition issues. We all know that, right? In Alabama, we're not doing so well in terms of our obesity rate and or our nutrition. And what I think this helps you to understand are some of the reasons for that. Does that make sense? So we have lots of talks about what we think is going on, but the qualitative data helps you to understand what's going on in the community that we would most like to reach. This is a park. It used to, that's nice, the park. It used to be nice until the gangbangers came, and it's right next to the train tracks, so it's not safe for kids. So that gives you a feel for that. That's the park. Again, this is to me the beauty of the qualitative research that the photos were taken by members of the community, and it's their words, and it really gives you a feel for what we may be missing. This is a picture of a park that was in the making since 2003 for the kids in our community. As you can see, we've only gotten as far as the benches. Okay, so that helps you see, well, but hopefully those photos, again, is a different way to collect qualitative research by having community members take photos of their community and then writing little captions about it. It helps bring that to life. NPR did a series of qualitative studies. They did some interviews with persons in Mississippi and Alabama, and asked them what they thought was the definition of obesity. Almost to a participant, the responses were when you can't fit into a chair at the movie theater. No one thought you were obese until you weighed over, I think it was 250 pounds. I bring this up because what was striking to those who do research in this area, like you hear the story and you look at those kind of photo issues, like you see now why maybe those children can't engage in physical activity in their communities. You hear when people talk about their definitions of obesity, what do? I also have an PhD in public health stuff. When we think about what obesity means, it's very different than when you kind of go out to the community. Does that make sense? And sometimes the quantitative questions don't really help you capture what people are really thinking. Who would have thought, like to me, by the time you can't fit into the seat at the movie theater, there's a lot of intervention before that. Does that make sense? But if that's where they're starting, that's very different. That means we're not touching that population with our public health messages, with whatever we're doing when they come in for medical visits. Does that make sense? There's a gap there in what we think, or how we define obesity and what's happening in the community. So that's the space where I think qualitative research can be incredibly helpful to kind of filling in that gap, or at least helping us understand what the community is saying in a very different way. Community audits in rural North Carolina, again, these are community audits. The communities are telling you what's going on. They call them windshield tours. I love that. You drive through the community and they kind of observe the social and physical characteristics of the community. You can learn so much by just going through the communities you want to work in and just looking at the environment. You can do that in urban and rural areas. There's a really nice study, again, looking at physical activity and nutrition for kids. Just like some of the photo stories were saying, the one I think about a lot was in an urban area, and a lot of parents are saying that it's just not safe for their kids to go outside to play once they come home from school. So you got the kids who are stuck in the house. Not because they don't want them to go outside and engage in physical activity, but because it's not safe. And what do you do? Because like they really were like, we want them to go out. We just don't know how to provide a safe place for them to go out. And that could be different than how we're thinking about those parents and their relationship to physical activity. Does that make sense? So we may say, and we do say sometimes, that all kids are just playing video games. Well, let's look at where those kids live, or are there other factors? I'm not saying that that's not a factor. What I'm saying is that may be part of how parents are just trying to manage children who may be living in some unsafe neighborhoods. Are there walking paths in those neighborhoods? So you can do a lot, like by these windshield tours, and or like the photo voice. I love those because they really just looking at the physical environment can tell you a lot.
So quick question. So is there, I mean, you talk about, I guess, the gang violence, and then you have is that prevalent in the rural areas as well?
It's becoming more prevalent, yes. Yeah. So if you go back to some of the Photoshops, like one of them, that was in rural communities, they talk about like not being able to finish the park because that's where the gangs are hanging out.
The sketchiest part. The sketchiest part.
So that can be really difficult to kind of, how do you manage that? And that's something that's really hard to address. Something that came up, just another, well, let me finish this now. You can have ground truthing, again, which is kind of another way of really paying attention, kind of going out into the community to see what's happening, objectives. People can think about free or low-cost gyms, walking trails, grocery stores, community parks, food deserts. That's becoming a really big focus area for those who do nutrition research, kind of neighborhoods that just don't have any grocery stores and or like they're trying to create vegetable gardens in these kind of cement jungles. They're trying to provide healthier options in some communities. Sidewalks are a big deal in neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks. How close are the fast food restaurants to a community versus other healthier food options? Those are really, really big issues. And some of that is coming to light from some of the qualitative research when you're asking people kind of in the interview format or in a focus group, why aren't you eating healthier foods? Or does that make sense? That's where some of this data is coming. Like they're talking about that. But the grocery store is X amount of miles away, but the McDonald's is right on the street. And here's a great one. So Michelle Obama started this campaign to minimize the food deserts, have more grocery stores and healthier options, more food gardens, and still people were not taking advantage of them. They didn't know why. So they've been doing some more qualitative research to figure that out. Anyone have a clue? I'm sorry?
People want
Is that
Is it like the communities are driving what you're observing in the community? And,
yes, the junk food tastes better. So, but who knew, right? But it was the focus group data that helped them figure out. So even when they said, okay, we're going to put the grocery stores in the community, we'll put in more fruits and vegetable gardens, people were like, well, thank you. However, I am now very accustomed to that Big Mac and the fries, and I can get a shake and not that much more money. Does that make sense? So the food tastes better, so that was an issue. So they had to now not only put the healthier option, but figure out how to encourage people to eat it. And there's one other thing.
Make it affordable.
There you go, make it affordable. I thought I'd point this out because this is, to me, the beautiful part about qualitative research. Even when we have all of these ideas, sometimes if we're not connecting with the community, what do our ideas matter? Does that make sense? And we're still not really reaching our population. So they were stunned. They really thought the solution would be to start putting in more grocery stores and the gardens, the community gardens. And it just wasn't enough. No one had thought about that people had kind of acquired the taste for the fast food places around them. So what happens if you just get rid of those fast food places?
We'll drive to another fast food place?
Yes, that was the first solution. They was like, we'll just get rid of those. And it didn't solve the problem. What they then needed to do was really step back and say, how can we modify taste?
Start at a young age.
Start
start at a young age.
There you go. That's a good finding. Yes, and that's where we are. So this has been going on for like the last 3 to 4 years, seriously, and that's what they finally figured out. They had to start targeting younger kids. Does that make sense? So all of us in this room, we'll keep eating that burger. But if they can start with the younger children, like helping, encouraging them to eat healthier. Some examples are smoothies, like healthy smoothies. You can do that. So they're trying to kind of have a bridge between go eat that spinach and not the hamburger, and kind of a smoothie seems to be a nice bridge because smoothies are pretty good, kids like them, and you can make healthier smoothies with fruit and or vegetables in them. I tried this because I wanted to see. I have 2 4.5-year-olds, and I gave them what they call the green smoothie. It has spinach in it, yogurt. I know, but they love it. They don't know what's in it. It's just a green smoothie. So I don't think it really works for kids. But so smoothies seem to be kind of one thing they're trying to bridge between the kids that healthy and really unhealthy food. But it was the qualitative research that helped them to figure out why what they thought would work wasn't working. By doing focus groups, by asking more questions, by individual interviews, that helped them to really figure out why people weren't taking advantage of the food. I actually have, but when I do the grandparent interviews, because I work with Michelle, who does do physical activity and nutrition, and a colleague of mine, Monica Baskin, who's still here, I went to our grandparents on a tour, and most of them were overweight. I got one bus from UA, one van, and it wasn't large enough, not because of the number of people, but because they took up so much food. I was like, I need to have my colleagues who do obesity nutrition come talk to my group. But one thing that I learned from doing the qualitative interviews with them, even if they were cooking the healthier foods, they were cooking greens until the nutrients, because the water was all green. Does that make sense? They were kind of cooking the nutrients out of the foods. So just by kind of talking about what you're eating and having someone come in and talk about those kind of things, they really helped them to modify how they were cooking the food. So there's, to me, a ton you can learn by observing. I just learned they were all overweight. But by kind of asking more questions and really doing kind of a focus group within our support group, it helped me figure out ways in which I can modify how they were thinking about their health and well-being. So as part of a community audit, community resources, this is a really small sample size, but you can think about walking trails, community parks, and free, reduced, or no-cost gyms. So these are kind of ways that people, from looking at community audits or community resources, are talking about what would be helpful for them. And that can be really, really, really empowering and important to know.
What is ground truthing?
Ground truthing is kind of going into the community, you're kind of on the ground, not physically on the ground, but like you're in the community and you're asking the community.
You're like exploring yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. And just really kind of learning more from the community about what's going on. And let me say this, because you're all researchers and you all have to, I'm sure if you're doing research, getting some pressure by funding. So doing really good qualitative research, again, NIH is funding it, you can get the money for it, you can get foundation funds for it. It does take longer. And it takes longer because it's more time consuming to do it well. But I encourage you all to think about it and explore it. But you may do a mix of qualitative and quantitative just until you get some publications that are funding to do the qualitative and more detailed. I just want to be realistic about that. I think it's great, but it can take a long time. And you want to start, if you're an assistant or associate professor, to partner with others. That can be really helpful. There are a few people on your campus who do qualitative research. Partnering with them may help you. Does that make sense? The funding is low for you. Kind of partnering with others in your area to provide funding can be really helpful. A community audit, agreement between windshield tours and secondary data varies. Okay, so when people went on their windshield tours versus when people collect the data, here's what, like, the best agreement, for example, was sidewalks and grocery stores. So what people needed, there was agreement there. There was a moderate agreement between fast food restaurants. The community really doesn't dislike it as much as maybe we would say there are too many fast food restaurants in the next neighborhood, and that's not what the community would give back. Does that make sense? So there was kind of discongruence there. and low agreement for proximity of low-income neighborhoods and fast food restaurants. Again, the researchers were saying, wait a minute, from what we see, there are just too many fast food restaurants in a small space, but that's not what the community saw. So sometimes your qualitative data tells you something different than what you expected to find, but that can be really helpful information. Okay, here's something we will do. You have been given an opportunity to conduct research, to conduct a research study to answer the following question. What are the barriers and facilitators to physical activity in Birmingham? Anyone have any thoughts?
Sidewalks, there's like no sidewalks here.
Yes. Yes. Sidewalks. Anything else?
Yeah, like
Safety.
the
Yes.
way lampposts and wide streets is really not good there.
Yes.
Ridge lines,
I'm sorry?
like Red Mountain and Shays Mountain. Physical barrier.
The barbecue.
That's funny. Yeah.
The temperature and humidity.
Yes.
Some of the parks that cost students them.
So they have the bike share program, but you have to have a credit card in order to use it.
These are great.
I didn't think about that, but yeah, you would, wouldn't you? Yeah. And then, I didn't know it either. My husband pointed it out to me. Oh, yeah, that's really great. We have to do it.
There's like a social barrier to it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes like, I don't know, if you walk somewhere, people look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
There's no,
Like I walked from here to Highlands. People are like, oh, you walked to Highlands Hospital.
I walk to campus, or I
Yeah.
my colleagues.
Yeah.
I think biking is really difficult here. There's no biking lanes, there's no possibility for that.
only New York City has it.
I'm an NPR junkie, and they did a story, by the way, talking about biking, just in the U.S. and how unpopular that is across income groups. That we're very far behind other developed countries in thinking about biking. But these are all really great examples, and the one I just want to highlight, because we don't talk about it enough when we talk about barriers to physical activity in particular, is the weather. So we want people to kind of engage in physical activity, but it really is, and that comes up when you interview people, is the weather. It's too hot, it's too cold. So the mall is a kind of facilitator, a place you can suggest. I don't know if you all know this, but most of the malls in almost any city open early before the stores open, and they stay open later. But they definitely open early, and they do that so that people can walk. Next time you go to a mall, indoor malls, Galleria, sorry. I don't live here anymore. I'm like, the Galleria, pay attention, like there are big benches throughout the mall, and they're kind of set up. So like you can walk a while if you're older or you just need to take a break, you can sit on the bench and then get up and walk some more.
Then another question, what's the information like related to exercise distribution in different communities? Because I hear everyone talking, but it's all crap. You can just do air squats in your own apartment. You don't need to go out, right? And in fact, that's better than walking. So when you're talking about what people understand about the importance of exercise, I mean, how's that information distribution worked out?
It's not. So that's another area is just what people do know about exercise and or nutrition. The information is very limited, just on how to think about ways you can get physical activity. But there's something about fresh air that we think is fabulous. But it's really important so the information is not bidirectional. Some people have it, and typically the better educated you are, the better resourced you are, the more likely you are to have that education. But that still breaks down within ethnic minority communities. But something I wanted to go back to before I move on with just another example, and that was, I'm on a study with this UAB, UA, Tuskegee Morehouse, and we have the Whitmore Resource Centers for Minority Aging Research. There's now 7 throughout the country. But we're the only southern one, and there's one northeastern one, and it's at the University of Pennsylvania at the moment. They wanted to know, they did a focus group with minority older adults to find out what they wanted them to focus on in terms of health and well-being in the Philadelphia community. Here's what they found: no one saw food. the older adults wanted to know about their teeth. So the researchers just kind of made this assumption. They were lining up resources to talk with them about more physical health issues, if that makes sense, and then I think depression came up. So they were kind of lining up the resources. They would do a series of just kind of informal meetings to teach them about this and tell them how to get resources. What they wanted to learn was about the teeth. Many of them had really poor, bad teeth. So they ended up, it was a physician, I forgot his discipline, but he was a PI for this Rick Moore site. He ended up partnering with the dental school, and they did a series of workshops, educational workshops on teeth, like how to take better care of your teeth, what's important, how much you eat impacts your teeth, and the older adults loved it. But no one saw that coming. Does that make sense? They ended up they formed a new partnership. They did a few other topics as well, but that was really their primary topic. And it came from them doing small focus groups with the older adults in their community to figure out what they wanted. And I use that as an example because sometimes, again, we think we know what's best for the community. Not that they didn't need other topics, but what they really wanted was to learn about how to engage in better dental hygiene. And they had a low-income dental clinic that they could learn about, partner with. So it really helped a lot, because that makes sense, not just the grant, they created a new partner, but also helped the older adults in the community to learn more about a topic that was really important to them that they just didn't know about. And they talked about how your teeth impact your physical health. I mean, it was really a very nice series that they created, but it came from asking the community what they needed from doing some focus groups. And that's the business. Again, I talked about this. The NIH is now interested in the inclusion of qualitative approaches, and you have to have a systematic description of the nature of the data collection to be used that people understand it. You just can't say, I'm going to do qualitative data. Are you using open-ended questions? Will you be doing interviews or focus groups? Kind of describing that in detail. It's been incredibly helpful. Right here is the sources, Qualitative Methods in Health Research. It's put out by the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research at NIH. It's a really incredibly great guide that provides a lot of information on qualitative research. And you want to present a clear and convincing rationale for why qualitative approaches are not only appropriate for addressing the research question at hand, but why they are most likely to produce the useful findings. So basically, why qualitative research over what we've always done, which would typically be quantitative research methods, and or sometimes if you're collecting physiological data, or some combination thereof. But why you want to just do qualitative research, or why you want to do it in partnership with other methods. So just kind of, you don't just say, I'm doing this. But like any other thing, you need to justify why you're doing it, and that can be incredibly helpful to securing NIH funds for qualitative research. And, sorry, we're almost there. You may want to have focused discussion of the universe studied and the sample recruited for qualitative assessment. So talk about your sampling plan, why the sample is really important, and specification of the time frames that bound the data collection. How long you think it'll take, when you plan to do it, in the day, in the evening, depending on the population you're using. That can be incredibly helpful and really important to include as part of your research. So if I want to look at physical activity in children, I really want to, if I want to do some observational data collection, I probably want to do that in the evening, because that makes sense, after school, so I can really be able to talk about what children are doing after school. So really making sure your methods match what your questions are. There are enough people who are doing qualitative research now. We can no longer just say something broad and apply. You really have to be able to tie your questions to your methodology. Okay. And careful presentation of the nature of the data to be collected. Why do you want to collect it? How do you will store the data? How the data will be used? All of that's really important. That's pretty much what that is. And we talked already about measurement bias. So researchers kind of like, how do they deal with measurement bias when they're observed in the day-to-day lives of the participants for the study? That means having another person with you, having multiple ways to collect the data, and really being able to talk about that in your methodology section. here's some researcher bias, and here's ways we're addressing it. Just kind of lay that out up front to show that you understand that there is bias and ways that you explicitly plan to address it. Okay, good. Before references, there's just a few other, I mentioned PCORI earlier. I think now everyone is familiar with PCORI. PCORI is a great source of funds. They, right now, very interested in qualitative research. PCORI is not NIH, so I don't know if any of you have looked at a PCORI application yet or plan to use PCORI funds, but do take time to review the application. And some people assume it will be just like NIH. It is not. PCORI is its own animal. They're very interested in qualitative research, but they also are interested in community partners. And really, you have to lay out your community partnership if you would like PCORI funds. That makes sense. That's a big piece of it. Qualitative research lends itself nicely to partnering with the community, which is why I think PCORI is very open to qualitative research methodology. But again, you have to kind of lay all that out. But you absolutely have to lay out your community partners. They need to be involved in the whole research process, so not just kind of like, they're over here, but how they help you form your questions. Does that make sense? Like they have to be involved in your research proposal from the beginning until the time you submit the proposal. Does that make sense? And how they'll help you with the interpretation results. So, PCORI is a great search, great funding option for qualitative research. Again, NIH is open to qualitative research, and you just have to kind of really pay attention to it in detail, as I mentioned earlier. There's some foundations that are open to qualitative research depending on what your research question is. And definitely many are open to a combination between qualitative and quantitative research. That can be really helpful. I tried to broadly cover kind of what qualitative research is. The last slide has a lot of references on it that I think would be helpful to you. The NIH guide can be incredibly helpful to you to follow up with that. For more information just about putting the study together, the YouTube video that's on one of the slides will help you in terms of coding. The references will help you. I am available or can shoot you references if you just have questions. You can, please feel free to email me and I'll try to be as responsive as I can. Do you all have any other questions now?
I think it was the first time I heard about PCORI.
Oh, what is it? Okay, so the PCORI is the acronym. It's PICORI. I am blanking on the patient-centered outcomes research.
Heard about that.
PCORI, again, they have different types of funding, so PCORI is absolutely great to look at this point. Yes.
Is there some type of tool or location, resource of any kind that we can access to find like surveys that are validated? Because I find that there's a lot of surveys out there that people just created themselves and haven't validated in any community.
That's a really great question. So my short answer to that is looking within your topic area of study. Look at a few questionnaires, particularly at some that may be 10 years older and some more recent ones, to see what questionnaires are coming up more consistently. Those will be the ones that are most validated and most common in your area of study. Does that make sense? To use some of those. And sometimes, like you can use a standard questionnaire, but may need to modify the language a little bit to fit your population. You can do that as long as you explain that. You really feel why you're making some modifications. So there's no good resource that I can think of, but that's the best way to do it. Well, thank you all very much. If you have questions later, please feel free to follow up with me. I'll try to answer that. Have a good afternoon, a good day for early.